Thanks, Chris. It's 7 minutes past 6. A war on nature. That's how some environmentalists are describing the 11 mining projects selected for fast tracking. The list released by the government yesterday includes Trans-Tasman Resources seabed mining and the Waitaha Hydro project, both previously rejected for their adverse effects on the environment. But the government says the projects will bring big economic benefits. For more, we're joined by Russel Norman from Greenpeace Aotearoa and Patrick Phelps from Minerals West Coast. Good morning to you both.
Good morning.
Morning.
Russell, I'll start with you. What are your biggest concerns about the impact of the government fast-tracking these 11 mining projects?
Well, so TTR is a good example. So this is an Australian mining company, Trans-Tasman Resources. They want to mine tens of millions of tonnes a year from the seabed in South Taranaki. That will cause immense environmental consequences and harm in doing that. Then they'll process it on the ship, they'll dump it back in the water, the sediment plume will go through the water and obviously get in the way of the blue whales that live there as well as the rare dolphins. The environmental impacts of this project are so profoundly bad that it's been rejected at all the court levels and eventually the Supreme Court sent it back. Aside from that, what this project does is it prevents a large offshore wind project from going in that place. So the offshore wind companies, which are well down the track to put a huge piece of renewable generation there, cheap power for New Zealanders, that will be blocked as a result of this seabed mining project. So it's not only caused immense environmental harm at the place because of the seabed mining, but it also blocks renewable energy project that could give us cheap renewable power. It's devastating whichever way you look at it, and that's why the courts have rejected this project, and the government wants to fast track it through this terrible legislation that they're planning to establish.
Patrick, I'll come to you listening in. What's your response?
I think first things first, you need to get a sense of proportion. The entirety of the South Taranaki Bite's about 3.6 million hectares. It's a massive area, right? And it's not exactly like we haven't got managed marine activities there already. We already have an oil and gas industry that operates in the Taranaki. We've got commercial fishing. We've got just ocean transport, generally speaking. But as I said, in total, it's about a 3.6 million hectare area within New Zealand's entire 400 million, hectare economic zone. The mining permit itself covers about 24,000 hectares, but that's much larger than the area that will actually end up being mined. My understanding, looking at what has been approved, is the total approved disturbance per year is about 300 hectares. And at any one time, only 100 hectares is going to be allowed to be disturbed and then rehabilitated afterwards. It's not as if there's not natural disturbance that can occur on the seabed due to underwater landslides, volcanic eruptions, things like that. Creatures that live under the water are very capable of recolonising those areas. My understanding is that the areas that will be disturbed by the mining will be recolonised by ocean life within about a 2 to 5 year period.
What economic benefits, Patrick, do you expect from these fast-tracked mining projects?
Broadly speaking, you have to look at how New Zealanders are voting with their feet, right? So mining's less than 1% of New Zealand's GDP. I can see why for people living in other parts of the country, they might not think that's a national treasure. But if you look at parts of the country like Taranaki, Hauraki district up in the Coromandel, West Coast, etc., it's the largest or, the second or third largest contributor to GDP. We've got close to 700,000 New Zealanders choosing to go and live in Australia now. I'm not sure quite what problem Russell has with Australians, but we've got, close to, like I say, 700,000 New Zealanders living over in Australia because you can see the economic benefits of mining. It's the highest productive sector in New Zealand. It's got the greatest productivity in a country that has been languishing with its productivity for decades, and it's among the highest paying sectors as well, job for job. It's a regional gem, and I think the government's right to be encouraging it.
Russell, I'll come to you. You've heard Patrick there. What's your response?
So this mining project by TTR, so the mining projects are by Australian companies. The reason why that's relevant is all the profits are simply going to flow offshore. So we'll be left with the mining sites, which won't be rehabilitated. They'll just be destruction zones, and the profits flow offshore. If you look at the New Zealand economy, it's not like the Australian economy. Our two biggest export sectors, which is food and tourism, are built on clean, green New Zealand. That is the basis for those very large export sectors. People don't come in their millions to New Zealand to see mining sites. They come to New Zealand to see the natural environment, which the environment movement has been protecting for decades. That's why they come here. So the idea that somehow this small industry, which contributes in royalties $21 million a year to the government, so it's peanuts, is going to make a dramatic difference to the New Zealand economy is just absurd. You double it, it's $42 million a year in royalties to the New Zealand government, right? So it's a relatively small industry which is causing very large environmental harm, and if you destroy the underpinnings of the food sector and the tourism sector, then you destroy the fundamental part of New Zealand. I'll tell you one other thing. If we're going to build a high-tech economy in New Zealand, we need the people to do that, right? New Zealand's offering what makes us great is part of what makes us great is the natural environment. It's also the public health system, public education system. It's a good place to live, but it is the natural environment and its protection of that. So when the government comes in with this fast-track law, which removes all the environmental protections and says you can build incredibly destructive new coal mines, seabed mining, incredibly destructive projects, it undermines what makes New Zealand great and why we love this country. And that is the problem with it for a relatively minor industry, which can cause great environmental harm.
Patrick, does Russell make a point here? The economic benefits is tiny, the environmental harm is massive.
I mean, I just have to respectfully disagree with Russell, unfortunately. You look at the West Coast as one prime example. The main drivers of our economy, we've got a mining industry, we've got a food producing industry, and we've got a vibrant visitor industry. I mean, living here, looking around the West Coast, we've got forests everywhere, we've got the largest percentage of protected land in the country, and we've also got a vibrant mining industry. I just don't think that those things have to be mutually exclusive. I do think we can get a win-win where we've got a vibrant mining industry that's encouraging investment in high-income jobs in regional areas of New Zealand. I just don't think our big three cities should be the only growth areas in the country. We want to make sure that places like Hokitika, places like Hauraki are vibrant areas where people want to live in and return to.
Russell, can it be a win-win? Has Patrick got an idea there where the economic benefits do balance with the environmental commitments?
The reason why the West Coast has this tourism economy is because the environment movement stopped the forest industry destroying those forests, right? Let's remember there have been huge environmental battles on the West Coast, and if they've been allowed to do what they want to do now, for instance with mining, and the same with the forest, they would have turned those forests into cardboard boxes. That was the plan before the environment movement stopped it, right? So then what the environment movement has done in this country year after year, project after project, they said there's got to be environmental constraints on development projects. We're not against development, we're not even against mining. It's that it has to be done within environmental constraints, right? And what the government's fast track bill does is remove those environmental constraints. TTR is a classic case, right? The court said this can't go ahead, this seabed mining project, because its environmental harm is so profound. You cannot demonstrate it's safe for the environment, right? So you can't go ahead with the project until you prove that you can, right? So we're not saying you can't go ahead with mining projects, but it needs to be within environmental constraints. The new fast track legislation removes those environmental constraints. We already have a fast track legislation, right? 130 different applications have gone through, fewer than 10 were declined. This new fast track legislation, but what it does is it says we're going to take away the environmental protections, and it's only if you take away the environmental protections that a project like TTR seabed mining could happen. Otherwise it can't happen because it causes such harm.
All right, Patrick, I'll leave you with the last word. I mean, are steps being taken to ensure sustainable mining practices are into mining?
Yeah, I believe so. I mean, since we've had the Crown Minerals Act and Resource Management Act in 1991, I would challenge anyone to point to a negative environmental outcome from a mining project. What this legislation does is it tilts the weighting, I guess, in favour of economic development, productivity, which has been languishing for the past 30 years since we passed the RMA.
Patrick, Russell, thank you so much for your time this morning. Appreciate it.
Thank you.
Thank you very much.